千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. So there's a chapter in there called The Blanket. It's part of a section that speaks to one's relationship with others. And as I mentioned at the beginning, when it comes to leadership, those who lead and those who follow, it's about trust. It's about relationship that is established, or in some cases, destroyed between the two, depending on whether the leadership is positive or negative. So specifically, this particular story, I want to explain what it looks like to undertake an action that is seamless, that can escape the attention of most people. So specifically, I talk about seamless compassion. So this story comes to us from ancient China, that once upon a time in ancient China, there was an emperor who was known as a great ruler. One day, it was time for him to visit a distant temple for the winter ritual. So the imperial guards assembled outside the palace for his departure. The emperor's most trusted minister came out of the palace first. He greeted the commander in charge of the imperial guards assembled outside. He said, "Good morning, Captain. I see your men are ready." "Yes, sir," the captain saluted to the minister. The captain said, "Our most elite warriors will accompany His Majesty to the temple for the winter ritual. I only wish I am allowed to go with him to make certain of His Majesty's safety." At this, the minister laughed. "At ease, Captain. Peace prevails in the land, and we have no dangerous enemies. To tell you the truth, I'm actually more concerned about this cold winter." "The same thought crossed my mind, sir," the captain said. "Although His Majesty's carriage is very well appointed, it will still be freezing out there as they travel across the land on a day like this. They will be moving at such high speeds that the wind will seep in from the outside and make the carriage uncomfortably cold." The minister nodded at this and said, "You are quite correct. That is why I have instructed the head servant to prepare a warm blanket in the carriage. It will make the trip much easier and much more comfortable for His Majesty." It was exactly at that moment that the emperor emerged, coming out of the palace. The minister, the captain, and the guards all dropped to their knees. The emperor acknowledged everyone, and they all rose up in unison. Then the emperor approached the minister. He asked, "I trust all is in a state of readiness?" The minister responded, "Yes, Your Majesty. Everything is already set for departure." "Excellent." So the emperor turned and started to climb into the carriage. And then he seemed to recall something. He climbed back down. He said to the minister, "There's one thing I wanted to ask you. Yesterday, when you gave your report on the flooding in the Guangdong province, we didn't have time to go into the details. So tell me, how many families were displaced by the floods?" The minister replied, "Just over 200 families, Your Majesty." "I see," the emperor said. "So what actions had the regional authorities taken for disaster relief?" The minister replied, "Your Majesty, the Guangdong governor reported that about half of the affected people were able to stay with relatives. For the other half, he was able to accommodate them in temporary shelters. So their discussion continued. As this was going on, the captain noticed the head servant in the palace running out of the palace with the blanket in his hands and a panicked expression on his face. He ran out, ran to the carriage, put the blanket in it in hasty fashion, and then stood by the carriage with his eyes downcast, not daring to move an inch. Immediately, the captain realized that the servant must have failed to prepare the blanket in advance. This was a lapse of great dishonor because one had to be completely impeccable in serving the emperor. The captain was shocked, but remained silent because none could speak in the presence of the emperor without permission. Speaking of the emperor, he was finishing up his discussion with the minister. He said, "Next time, if I forget to ask you about the details regarding such disasters, I want you to remind me." "I shall indeed, Your Majesty." The minister bowed deeply as the emperor turned and climbed into the carriage. The captain gave a signal, and the mounted guardsmen led the carriage away from the palace. Gradually, their speed increased. After a while, they disappeared over the horizon. Upon this, the captain felt he could no longer contain his silence. He turned to the minister. "Sir, the head servant, he..." The minister cut him off. "Yes, Captain. I saw the whole thing. I know what happened." So the captain said, "Shall I arrest him, sir, for negligence?" The captain's hand went to his sword. "No, Captain," the minister shook his head. "It is His Majesty's wish to spare this man." "What?" The captain was confused, but His Majesty did not even notice that the blanket was missing. "Well," the minister said, "that is exactly what he would say if you and I were to bring up the matter." The minister explained, "You can stake your life on the fact that he did notice. He also knew that if he said anything about this lapse, imperial tradition would compel the severe actions be taken against the servants for dereliction of duty." The captain was beginning to understand. "So that is why His Majesty pretended not to notice and then stalled for time, discuss a few things with you just to give the servants a chance to remedy the error." "Precisely," the minister said. There was admiration in his eyes. Our emperor not only forgave this man, but did so in the most seamless way possible at the time. So that's the end of the story. And that's an example of what I call seamless compassion. It's seamless in this context, meaning that it's an action that is so smooth and graceful that the vast majority of the people are not even likely to be aware of them. Only those who know the Tao will be able to sense that changes have taken place. In the story, this is represented by the minister, who not only observed, but understood. The captain represented the level where most people are. He needed to have things pointed out and explained to him. So, one thing to learn from the story is to incorporate similar seamless actions in our own lives. So I have some suggestions on how we can do that. So in our lives, we know that there's going to be triggering events from time to time. What I mean by that is things that set you off. In the story, it was the realization that the head servant had neglected his duties to bring out the blanket. In your life, the triggering event may be an offense, a mistake, a failure on someone's part to keep a promise, somebody letting you down, basically. So then the question becomes, well, how do you react? Whether you are in a leadership position or not, you can practice seamless compassion. And from the Tao perspective, one would argue that you are always in a leadership position one way or another, from one perspective or another. You are leading other people or you are leading yourself. So there's a triggering event. What's next? Well, like the emperor, what you want to do is to maintain your composure. Remain cool and collected. Don't let the triggering event rattle you. It's not that bad. It's something that you can deal with from a cool and collected mindset. Then you want to recall to mind that you can be considerate in any situation. This stems from the realization that nobody is perfect, people are not perfect. They do the best they can with what they have. And it's the same with us. We're always doing the best we can with what we have. So the fact that the triggering events occurred may mean that they don't have enough. They don't have enough, so they can only do the best with what is insufficient. So you want to be considerate of that and not immediately fly off the handle. Then you want to practice detachment, realizing that there's no need to take offense. There's no need to get angry, feel upset. This comes from the realization that those emotions rarely improve the situation. There is a time and place for anger, for emotional upset. But in most circumstances, as we interact with other people in daily life, we find that again and again that those strong emotions don't really help anyone, don't really help anything. Lastly, there's a realization that there's no need to forgive in the conventional sense. Simply let it go if and when it is appropriate to do so. That last line is actually important. When there's a lapse, when there's negligence, a dereliction of duty, there's an appropriate response. It may be something that you're responsible for. It may be something that you don't want to see repeated. So there's going to be an appropriate response, which may include more than just seamless compassion. It may indeed be the most compassionate thing that you can do to help the other person correct that problem, taking a much more active role than the emperor did in the story. But then there's also gonna be situations where you already know that the other person fully realizes what had occurred, and on their own initiative will make sure that it doesn't happen again. If that is the case, then it's time to cut them some slack. So the greatest leaders understand seamless compassion and understand how to apply that seamless compassion in an appropriate way. It is not encouraging incompetence. It is not encouraging negligence. It is to react in the way that is best for everyone going forward. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.